in the intellectual satisfaction behavior. It's really an emotional response of, I like to work here. I like to work alongside the people I work. And therefore, when we as HR leaders are looking and evaluating our ecosystem, our environment, and thinking of benefits, we should be considering this and should be propelling the design of benefits which can solicit this emotional response. And of course, we have to understand our employees and their needs to be able to respond to this emotional bonding that they would develop with the organization. Now, we could go on this, and I would like other colleagues to talk about it. But just one more point on this would be, now whether it is, parental care, whether it is for a younger employee, perhaps, some kind of waiver to education loan, or being able to help through the education loan, or whatever. But that is what will create that kind of bonding with the employer than anything else. So we as leaders have that responsibility on us to be able to understand it and then respond to it.
Arjun, do you have any points to add to this discussion?
Is this working? This is working.
And just before you start, we are talking about emotional connect, and we see multi-generational workforce. And I think multi-generational workforce, different age group have a different way of connecting. So probably if you can cover that.
Sure. So obviously we all know that the needs of different age groups for different generations are different. So what elicits an emotional response from one generation may not have the same impact on another. And that's where we are talking about flexibility, and we all know that over the last 4-5 years, a lot of work has gone into how to make the benefits package flexible, right? And people have come up with basket options, and you can go and choose what you want, eliminate what you don't want, so that every person can customize the benefits package as he or she needs. I think the other point to this is that I'm not sure how much I think it's important to go beyond that benefits package and influence people to do more. For example, I'm not sure how many people who are below 30 today would feel the need to have, let's say, a retirement plan or medical insurance or a term life plan, right? The moment you talk about retirement planning, I think a 25-year-old starts thinking about his dad, and not himself. Now, we all know that it is good for us to start planning retirement early, right? So, you may not want to offer a retirement plan as part of your benefits package, but you may want to encourage these people and educate them on the importance of starting investing into retirement plans early.
Yes, I think this is a very interesting point in terms of benefits. This example of encouraging employees to invest. So benefits need not be an expense. Now, this is a very clear example that it's not an expense on you, and it actually is helping employees, but it's not an expense. And with that, I also invite Suvodeep on some of his experience on this aspect of that.
Yeah, so I think what you guys said is right. The concept of benefits is changing now, and so is the expectation of the kind of benefits which employees want. For example, we did this study across 5 countries about 6 months back, very diverse countries: India, Brazil, France, Poland, and the US. And what we realized is that because of this multi-generational workforce that is there, what appeals to a 40-year-old actually doesn't appeal at all to the 25-year-old you mentioned. And the kind of benefits some of us, when we were younger, didn't even imagine. For example, having a comprehensive work-life balance policy as a structured benefit, those are now suddenly becoming hygiene. For example, I was talking to the panelists earlier today, and we have solutions like a culture pass in some geographies, where you get, if you want to reward your employees, you give them 2 tickets to a theatre. And it's a very structured benefit. We have gym pass in one country where we encourage your employees to go to the gym and so on. Whereas versus in a country like India where you have basic benefits and you have some higher order benefits. But this space is evolving so rapidly, and it's because in the next 10 years you'll have probably 30-40% of your workforce, even more, who are under 30, at least in the context of India. And what kind of benefits therefore you need to offer them? That's why the title is New Age. What is the New Age benefits? So I'll be happy to in fact share some of the excerpts of the study with you guys. Today we don't have that much time. But 2 highlights. One is that the changing nature of benefits and expectations. And secondly, benefits being a very integral part of the decision to join a company. So there is money and what kind of benefits, the non-monetary benefits that employees want.
Thank you. So with that, I think you also touched upon a very interesting point. I think everybody in the audience would be interested in work arrangements, flexibility in work, and that is one of the key benefits that a lot of not only new entrant to the workforce, I think all of us, even I would like to look at some flexibility in our work hours. And we have an audience where we have knowledge workers, very creative people, and we have people who have to be at the location. So I would really like to know from both the spectrum, from our panelists, what is which we need to keep in mind when we look at this flexibility.
So, talking about flexibility, actually, if we see, surveys and we consider findings, irrespective of the perks that companies offer, swanky offices, sleep pods, some of us may need those, but even then, some of the things which really touch employees even today, across generations, are about flexibility. Whether it is flexibility in availing leaves, whether it is time off, whether it is telecommuting, or whether it is work from home arrangements. This is really standing out as something which really helps employees, because that's all work-life integration is all about. The ones who are more senior, the ones who are more, older generation, they enjoy this flexibility because they have parental needs to take care of. I'm sure there will be few people in the audience who would have their parents to take care of, right? Yeah? And the newer generation, of course, has more hobbies to pursue and more things to do, and would also like work-life integration. So there is a great need for this, and different organizations are approaching it differently. But ultimately, it is rooted in the culture of the organization that we are trying to build. Because benefits cannot be viewed in isolation from the business context of the organization. And we are given the toughest job of balancing the both. So we have to look at it, and we have to approach it from that prism. We have to approach it from that perspective and draw a balance in terms of what kind of flexible work arrangements I can offer to my colleagues and my peers, and how would it make a business case. I could share more, but
yeah, that's very important. I mean, when we talk about either flexibility or innovation, okay, more often than not, we kind of overrate them. What's important is what works for you, what works in your culture, what works in your industry. Okay. For example, obviously a cement plant cannot run if you allow people to work from home. Right? But that said, for example, most of us work in large cities, and we all know the stress that commuting generates, right? Whether we are in Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, wherever, right? Now, that's, if you can relieve or that stress for your employees, okay, that's a big, big win. So, one of the things that we are doing in our organization starting the 1st of October is we are introducing flexi work hours. What we've defined is a core working hours between 10 and 4, and then you can start coming in at 8. So the guy who comes at 8 obviously gets to leave by 4, and so on and so forth. And when we were socializing this idea in the organization, we got just a brilliant response, because in a city like Mumbai, like it is elsewhere as well, in major cities, people go through an amazing amount of stress as far as commuting is concerned, and if you can somehow relieve that, that emotional connect that the panel's been talking about will just rise many folds. The other thing that work from home, again, it's highly contextual. Perhaps works in a bank, let's say in IT industry more than most other industry. It cannot work in banking in most roles. There are regulatory issues and other work-related issues. And the other point that perhaps we were discussing prior to starting this panel discussion was about how it impacts relationships, working relationships. Can, for example, a leader work from home perennially? Obviously not, because you need to be there. And when you are together, obviously there are far more synergies and a lot of creative energy gets generated. Collaboration happens when people are together. So these are aspects that that one needs to keep in mind before one starts thinking about flexibility and innovation.
Would you like to add anything?
I think it's you're right. The context is important. What we've also seen. So we work with HR leaders around the world, and what we've also seen is that more and more people are bucketing benefits into various categories. So for example, you have a base level benefit where you say, okay, so employees feel that these are the benefits that I get from probably any company that I work for, and I'm expecting these. I mean, if you don't have it, then there's a problem. Then there are benefits which they say, benefits which will help me learn and grow. So that's the next level, saying, okay, so it's almost like what we call, today the job market is like a swamber. Right? So you're choosing between 3 companies, 4 companies. Yeah, I mean, look at the young talent that's there in the market. And so therefore, then you start categorizing, okay, I've got, let's say, money is one part, then you have base level benefit. Then you have benefits which we call the connect benefits, which means what do I learn and grow? What is my path? So that's the second level of benefits. Then in some geographies, it's gone to a third level, which says that what are the reward mechanisms? Because they see that as a benefit. So do I just get a fixed pay and a variable pay, or do I get certain multipliers? Do I get certain other incentives for doing well, for excelling? And the fourth level is what we call the balance benefits. The balance benefits are things like work-life balance, things like an extended paternity leave, as an example. We recently read about the concepts like mourning leave. Like if there's a bereavement in your family, do you have a structured mourning leave policy? So and it's started. The situation today is that people are evaluating you as an employer on these 4 different parameters, and these buckets are there in their mind. And a lot of HR leaders are recognizing the fact that they need to make these buckets while designing, let's say, an offer or a compensation and benefit policy.
Yeah, so I think while we were discussing that, I picked up that morning leave, and normally the way it started is that in a large company, some personal need was felt, and a leader wanted that, and that's where a lot of these benefits originate. The leadership vision, and what's the vision of the organization, and how employees interact with the organization. So from that angle, Priemita, you were also touching the cultural aspect of that. So while you implement these benefits, and you are a practitioner, what is there in leaders' mind? Your experience on that, and how do they view very senior leaders when they are looking at this?
Sure. So I'll respond to that, and I definitely want to touch upon leaves, which continue to be once again one of the most significant benefit offered to employees, and how leaves can be made effective, because once again there is a cultural mindset of leave. We in India, we actually have paid leaves, but not many people use it, and lots of time leaves also lapse, and managers sometimes don't really show encouragement towards people taking time off. So we'll talk a little bit about that, because I think again we as HR practitioners have a role to play. But responding to what you have kind of initiated as a thread, which is a good one to say, the leader mindset vis-a-vis benefits is once again there are a couple of things. Firstly, you always look at the culture. And as the adage says, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? It is as powerful as that. So you have to have a sense on your culture, and you have to make sure that things are in line with your culture and it supports the culture. For example, if you are a formal organization, you are an organization which likes to exhibit hierarchy for its own valid reasons, because in very large organizations there is categorization of work tasks needed, then you cannot be offering benefits which are counterproductive to these. Similarly, if you are in a culture which is agile, a culture which promotes, I would not use the word equity, but equitably, right? The benefits got to be equitable across the segments
democratized, you mean?
Yes, across the talent segments, then you have to look at benefits in those ways. The third thing, of course, whether as HR practitioners or not, we turn a blind eye or not, but funding is a very important aspect, right? What is it that it is going to cost our P&L? But once again, as HR practitioners, we can be far more aware. In fact, I would recommend SHRM that in the next conference we should have a finance session for non-finance managers. It is very important. We should understand the P&L, because a lot of times the decisions we are making impact the P&L directly. So I'm just going to now touch upon the leave piece and give it back to you, Shatrunjay. For example, a very innovative benefit could be unlimited leave. Not heard of, right? Most managers would say that we may have a myth that most managers would think unlimited leave would mean absolute loss of productivity, while actually it's not the case. Even if we had a policy of unlimited leave, people would remain reasonable to consume leave that they are required to consume. If we have responsibility embedded in our culture. But the good thing, I'm linking it back to where the discussion was, the good thing is that what it does to your P&L is it completely removes the liability. And therefore the same thing can be used to offer other benefits to the employees, and that's how we as HR can be more innovative. Yeah? We'll talk more. Arjun, yes.
One point on unlimited leave. I used to work for a company called Marico, and we had unlimited leave. The entire policy, they started this about 15 years back. They said no limit on the level of, on the amount of casual leaves you can take in a block of 4 days, as long as your line supervisor is fine with it. They studied it for 5 years. They realized the average number of leaves people would take before and after had actually gone down. Because since it's in abundance, you're not worried about it getting over, or oh, I should take it because it will lapse and stuff like that. You just stop taking leaves, unless they really needed it. Otherwise, it was a great benefit. It's just the freedom. And not just that, they also had another policy of no one signs your reimbursement claims. Very interesting. It's self-empowerment, saying that I don't know what you've spent, but I trust you that you will file the right claims. We'll do an audit. If there's an integrity lapse, you'll be fine. But and what they realized is that it just cut down the process so much. Everybody was responsible. They spent the money in the right ways. Just self-accountable. So again, it's a benefit.
Again, emotional connect. Also, for example, I'm sure your employees come to you and talk to you about your casual leave and your annual leave, and at times say, hey, you know what, so and so company has this much leave and we have this much. No one will ever come and talk to you about the number of days of bereavement leave, because it's not about the number of days that you're getting. It's about the fact that the family, your organization realizes, and is empathetic to the fact that you need some personal time when there is a bereavement in your family. Now, coming back to the leadership point, I have a question to ask here. Your organization conducts a compensation survey? Yeah? Does it also conduct a benefits survey? Okay. Does your leadership or your CEO have a look at the comp survey data? Yes? When was the last time he saw the benefits survey data? Okay. If your answer is yes, then that's a big indication on how strategic your organization thinks benefits are. And if it's no, then perhaps you need to give it more importance.
Yeah, and I think this is a very strong point. And what we also see, while the discussion was on, I was reminded of this unlimited leave discussion. And we know Netflix has that. Netflix has this unlimited leave, and you can take that leave. About 4 or 5 years back, I was sitting on a similar discussion with an entrepreneur, and we were designing benefits policy. What kind of policy we should have. And then he said that I want the entire benefit policy in just one page. And it should not be more than that. So you just have the benefit, don't indicate limits or level, hierarchy, etc. And we will expect people to be responsible. And after 5 years, I think this organization, I will not name it, is one of the best employers in India, and he's always in the news, the entrepreneur, and he's this is an organization where it has become a unicorn and a very different sort of organization. And when I look at their brand, and I'll come into the employer brand. When I look at their consumer brand, it's a B2B company. But because for a B2B company, there is no need for a consumer brand. But their employer brand is so important and so significant that it is known by everybody. Probably, had they been like a normal company, people don't need to know that company because it's a B2B company. But through their employer brand, through their benefit policy, they have become such a strong employer brand that people know them. So that's another way of I would say organizations are differentiating, and that takes us to the communication aspect of benefits. So Arjun, I think we were discussing before this, and you had strong points on communication of benefits.
Well, I think most organizations spend a disproportionate amount of time communicating compensation as compared to communicating benefits, right? Perhaps compensation itself is also a highly emotive issue, and it's very tangible and visible, whereas benefits kick in only periodically, right? Perhaps that's the reason, but if you really want your benefits program to be a clear differentiator, please focus on communicating it well. Whenever comp day, that's what we call it in banking. Whenever there is the comp communication day, 2 months before that, there are scripts given to managers, and there are breakout sessions, and you try and reach all employees to explain the comp philosophy and how the comp review will work and all of that, right? So if you look at it, the time spent on communication compensation is so disproportionate. Now, the reason it is important to communicate benefits very well is because benefits can really be motivators. They can be differentiators, right? And in an era where profits, or margins are very, very thin, and business is becoming very challenging, right? Your compensation, you will not be able to give your 7%, 8% increase year on year. It's very difficult to, in general, to keep pace with inflation. At least that's what is true in the banking sector, right? So you need to ensure that you ramp up your benefits and communicate them well, so that your employees start truly seeing benefits as a differentiator.
Just adding to that, talking about communication of benefits and how important it is and how important we must consider. Another point to consider, as HR professionals, we'll constantly be faced with challenge that, at the end of the day, we can make performance communication and feedback an ongoing process. Right?
Yeah.
However, the measurement part of it still remains, right? Because all of us work for enterprises which would always have capping on the funding that can be that can be provided by way of rewards to the employees, right? And as long as that is there will always be some kind of differentiation or bell curve, right? It has to be proportionate to something, and that something in most places is called the output. And the culture is called meritocracy. The one who, in a sales organization earns more, rightfully gets more. But also, all of us as HR practitioners know that there will always be about 20-25% of employees who will fit that category, right? Maybe 30%, but not more than that. Everybody else, as we know, are solid citizens, right? They are the contributors, right? When we overemphasize on incentives and when we overemphasize on compensation, we should remain mindful that we are communicating essentially absolutely positively to 30% of the organization. 70% of the organization knows where they are. But when we are talking of benefits, the benefit of talking about benefits is that you're talking about 100% of the organization. Because benefits are not linked to inputs or outputs. Benefits are given to all staff members equitably. And therefore the need to even communicate it and put as much importance as the salary is. So that's the real.
This is very insightful, because and that's the role that work-life benefits plays in overall rewards portfolio. That it's something which is inherent in the employment contract, and it's sort of a trust that an employer places in you that we've hired you and will take care of you. At least the bare minimum will take. And with that, I think there is one more trend which, before we open for Q&A, I would like to discuss is a very definite trend on the wellness side. And this is which is a benefit which is probably either, and it would be useful for our audiences, that either somebody is thinking about it or already implemented. So any insight on the wellness benefits, or while you're implementing wellness benefits, what do you need to keep in mind?
So what we have seen is that wellness has many dimensions. So traditionally, wellness was defined as a Mediclaim policy that one would offer to employees and then stop at that. It extended to other forms. But today, wellness has become a very complex subject. So there are in fact two distinct aspects of wellness. One is physical wellness, one is mental wellness. And we partner HR leaders in delivering these programs in a lot of countries. So some of them are very taboo. So the moment you say mental wellness, your association is very negative. But we don't see it that way. We see mental wellness as creating a stress-free work environment. Or how do you enable your employees to cope up with heavy workload or very pressure-bound, time-bound projects and stuff like that. And there are specific programs designed for that. And physical wellness is of course moved beyond your curative aspects to preventive aspects. So how do you create a healthy workforce? How do you measure, and how do you then tell your CFO that because of these wellness benefits, the productivity has gone up X percentage, and therefore it's not an expense, it's an investment. So those dimensions of wellness are opening up and changing. That's why I thought I'd discuss about it.
No, the way you're putting in framework, I was wondering, am I the consultant or you? Because typically, consultants are accused of having all sort of frameworks and categorizing and all of that stuff. Thank you. Anything you'd like to add to it? The wellness?
Well, there is of course lots of work happening on wellness, and rightly so. Building on the point that Suvodeep was saying, psychological wellness is very important. Physical wellness very important. Also, another thing which comes to mind is that by running some of the initiatives on wellness, like yoga camps, or getting people to talk about women well-being, or talking about wellness after a particular age, and so on. There is another benefit that the organization gets, which is it's becoming an interactive organization. It's opening the organization to newer ideas and newer ways of connecting with the environment, which also promotes the cause of wellness. So there are, of course, other forms, but in the interest of time.
I think there is should be open to Q&A. So now I open the session to Q&A. So any questions, either about what we have discussed, or anything new which is in your mind?
Could you speak about benefits being annualized at some level, and versus compensation or hardcore compensation, which actually differentiates depending on performance level, etc. Do you believe, therefore, most companies have transitioned from differentiated benefit programs to a common benefit program?
In my view, I can say that it, again, for me, it is going to remain in the context, right? When Shatrunjay was giving the example of this very unicorn organization, I mean, from the words that he was using, it was very apparent what the culture of the organization is. So those organizations which are making this conscious move to keep benefits as equitable as possible would definitely raise their preference, definitely in the younger workforce, who feel that this would empower them as good as they can be, and they would feel accountable for it. So it is really in my opinion, it's really a choice of the culture that you want to drive. There would still be organizations who would believe that different levels of hierarchies, different kinds of benefits, it can be equitable but not really equal, and so on. And there may be a business case for that.
Yes, to your point, I think there are certain areas of benefits such as lifestyle benefits, for example, club membership or cars, where differentiation, I believe, should be created. However, I do not think it should be created in other basic benefits such as, life insurance cover or health insurance. Not life insurance, I mean health insurance cover or term life insurance.
Yeah, and also I think on that side, sometimes these benefits also have a tax implication, and many a time these are structured because of tax. So in that sense, it's not really a benefit. It is because some amount of cash is pulled into a benefit. So that will also depend on the salary that this person draws, and car is a very prime example of that. But beyond that, I would say, there are organizations of both nature. Organizations which differentiate across levels, and organizations I have seen, in my organization that I've worked, in some organizations there were levels, and different levels eligibility for different classes of travel and hotel, but in practice it never happened. In practice everybody gets the same hotel, so probably after some time that benefit becomes redundant, the levels. So whatever you do, and the point that Preemita was making is that culture will mold the benefit from a particular way of implementing it, and that I think we need to learn from it.
Only sometimes you can differentiate if you link that benefit to performance. So because there are times when organizations have performance linked benefits, that if there are rewards, recognition and benefits, right? There are three, and benefits it's still a relatively newer area, but so it's almost like saying that you have, let's say, taking the example of a club membership. Now you might tomorrow decide that an exceptional performer will get a club membership. Right?
So that's why I think recognition and benefits blur. They are blurring. Recognition and benefits are blurring. Yes.
And I can give an example of that. Some companies would, for example, who would want to make this differentiation could use an idea of saying that if you have performed well, you can earn points which you will cash out on certain benefits or cash out on trainings. Even that trend can be seen, because like Suvodeep was mentioning, it's mental well-being, it's spiritual well-being, it's physical well-being. So one has to remain innovative about it.
Any question from this side of the room?
There's one here.
We are talking benefits about motivating people. Do you have any data or anything available that it demotivates people to the extent, notwithstanding the employer brand which somebody was talking about? I always think that the employer brand is something which is more superior, and the benefits can only be the icing on the cake. But are there instances or data where the exit interviews or something indicate that the person has quit only because of insufficient benefits or benefits with a competitor which are better? Is that sort of scenario available? Because we are talking about motivation, benefits being the motivating factor. I am talking the other thing, that the lack of a benefit is a demotivating factor. Is there any record or any data available?
It's a very interesting question. I think you would like to jump in to answer this. Yes.
So I can just share that I cannot put data whether benefits have a direct correlation with retention or being able to go to different employers, but it definitely has direct correlation with engagement. A definite correlation with engagement. the better benefits or the more relevant benefits and communicated well and importantly executed well do impact emotionally to the employee that the engagement levels rise in the organization. That I can definitely share.
Since we are in the business of offering a lot of these benefits and helping organizations offer these benefits, what we've seen is that there are two kinds of organizations. One kind of organizations offer these benefits, but they don't take that extra effort of communicating it or making someone's KRA for adoption, percentage of employees who opted for these benefits. And there's the second kind of organization where there's a disproportionate focus on adoption of these benefits. And sometimes we step in and help them, and we've seen the engagement levels differ significantly. So, we don't have any data correlating that to dissatisfaction during an exit interview, but we do know that, and we do believe that higher engagement leads to higher retention and happier workforce.
I think we can
one very quick example, 2011, 2012 Eurozone crisis, most European banks, including ours, was going through a very bad time. I mentioned this earlier that perhaps there was no salary increase for 2 years, no uptick in total comp for 2 years. What we did was we ramped up the benefits. So we used to, in those days, have a differentiated medical insurance claim limit. We equalized it. And that had such a tremendously positive impact down the line. And we did this, coincidentally, not by design, but coincidentally about 2-3 weeks after the bonuses or the lack of them was declared, right? And it just changed the mood in the organization.
Yeah, so we have time for one last question.
So what we are talking about, the employee benefits, I'd like to understand, or can you share some of the insights? Is there any current trend for the dependents, staff members who work for a company? So what's happening for the dependents in terms of benefits?
I can share a few. Of course, there are medical coverages is there, but one or two which stand out. God forbid, but if the employee dies during service, there are benefits which are offered as 50% of the salary of the employee for the next 10 years is paid to the family. Or a fund is, I have worked in employers who have offered these kinds of benefits. Dependent or a relationship is offered a job. Or a corpus is created in the name of the child, which can be used for education, higher education, and until that time, interest on it can be earned to just run the household. So there are those kinds of benefits.
Can I take the last question?
Okay, so we'll make this.
Sure.
Yes,
I actually had a contrarian question. A lot of you spoke about how benefits. A lot of you spoke about how benefits, people spend a lot of time on compensation but not enough time on benefits. When organizations look at benefits, they look at the cost versus the benefit of a benefit, right? So a lot of times as HR professionals, we're guilty of not showing the value that benefits add, especially to an ROI kind of way. So actually, can organizations begin to look at, as HR professionals, can we begin to look at benefits as part of a total compensation and actually looking at differentiating benefits that way? It's just a contrarian question.
I think Arjun had just discussed this.
Yes.
So, I'm not sure whether benefits should be part of total comp, because it's, then you will start differentiating. The moment you make it part of total comp, you will start differentiating. Okay? Yes, it is difficult, benefits costs are rising. Okay? However, I think it's upon us as HR professionals to engage leadership and show them the value of benefits. You will never be able to tangibilize it as well as it happens in compensation, because compensation is clearly productivity related, okay, and behaviors and values related. The moment, for example, if you have a socialized or an equitable benefits plan, okay, you will not be able to show an ROI on it, or you will not be able to convince leadership, or you will not be able to calculate an ROI. So the only way to do it, okay, is to keep influencing the leadership. Next time you get the benefits survey, please show it to your CEO. Okay, perhaps the next time you have an opinion and engagement survey in your organization, focus on benefits, and that's one way of perhaps showing the value of benefits very objectively to leadership, and then you'll get perhaps lesser questions on budgets and things like that.
Yeah, I think the point is that ROI is a long story, but at least we begin with communicating it. I think just beginning of communication would serve a purpose. Obviously, you can do ROI and you can have sophisticated mathematics to support that. After so many years on HR and in this profession of consulting, I've seen people talking about it, but haven't really seen the real impact of any ROI calculation. Let me be very frank. And so I think we can begin with communication, and that itself will serve a very, very big purpose. And then, to satisfy our own selves, we can do all sort of maths. So with that, I would like to close this. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much for your time. And it was a very good session.